So, my dear friends, it seems that the new making-of episodes, as good as they were, also stirred up some discussion about a very particular aspect of the game. Women. For those who are out of the loop, or those who already forgot about it, well, if you have, please consult your doctor, you might have early onset of Alzheimer's. I will explain the situation to you. In very simple terms, many people are upset about the design of the women that we will encounter in the colony. There are those who call the game quote-unquote woke for making the women quote-unquote ugly, and there are those who call out the accusers, calling them quote-unquote incels. So far, so good. But what about these women? Well, I'll let you decide. Take a look at these pictures and make up your mind about it. Before we dive deeper into this matter, it is also interesting to mention that this discussion made some waves and even reached bigger YouTubers and users of X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. By the way, if you want to follow me and see me shitposting on the internet, be my guest. Of course, we live in times where the grift, no matter if it comes from the quote-unquote right or the quote-unquote left, has become the livelihood of many people, and to be honest, I don't really want to exclude myself here since I am indeed partaking in this discussion as well. As a preface, I want to make clear that every criticism is valid as long as it is constructive. If you are shouting like a madman or madwoman, call names and behave like a hard R caveman, well, joke's on you. If you are not able to form a coherent thought, you might have to overthink your approach. Still, it is undeniable that there has been a wind of change when it comes to character design when comparing older video games with newer ones, but I am not even thinking about a gap of 2 decades, I'm talking about a relatively short time frame of 5 years. One of those examples was Horizon Zero Dawn and its sequel, in which the protagonist underwent some more or less unfavorable changes. Quite recently, there was an outcry about the trailer for Witcher 4, in which some people claimed that Ciri was uglified. I didn't care much about that aspect, but I was more concerned with Geralt, the titular Witcher, getting swapped out for what fans might call the true protagonist of said universe. There are enough arguments to be made for or against the subject, but flooding the discourse with shallow talking points and hollow phrases will be ineffectual in the long run. I have always been on this side of the aisle, and I want to make my stand here and once more flesh out my point of view. Please criticize good and often, in a well-behaved manner, and formulate your points so everybody can understand them. See, I'm a kid of the glorious 90s, and I witnessed the rise and fall of gaming in real time, and especially the last 10 years have been pretty hard for gamers, not because there is a lack of games, quite the opposite, but rather an ongoing debate on how much modern-day politics infiltrate our everyday escapism and how lackluster many gaming experiences have become. Talking about not respecting the player's intelligence, shallow lore, way too overpriced products, the advent of subscription services that now also have percolated into all sorts of other media and products that we use in our everyday life. Yes, video games have become a massive industry, and all the suits want is your money. They don't care about the art aspect of a video game anymore, they just want to see their numbers go up. To bow the knee to shareholders means artistic death and crippling your creative mind. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule, but let's be honest here, those studios are few and far between. But I'm digressing big time here. Let's get back on track, shall we? The design of the women back in the day was peculiar to say the least. Even though those old games were a pixelated mess, those female models were quite spicy. From their hair to their facial features, certain exaggerated body parts, and their clothing. I'm not going to pretend that I wasn't one of those boys who cheated themselves into Gomez's private chambers just to watch Velaya take a bath, and oh boy, how she rinsed herself in those purifying waters. I don't know if I'm allowed to speak openly about this on YouTube, but quite frankly, I don't care right now. When Velaya got into the tub, she was buck naked. You could see her bare breasts, her posterior, and even her vulva. Yes, granted she had a big old 70s bush, which I actually quite enjoy now, thanks Gothic, but that doesn't change the fact that she was completely naked. If we dive into the concept art, the higher definition models and promotional material of back in the day, we can see where this is coming from. Hell, even if you stole from Graham in the Outer Ring in Gothic 1 or relieved Babo in Gothic 2's monastery of his important documents, you got some spicy art to look at. Who can blame those poor souls trapped forever in a mostly male-dominated space? The fact is, this game was made in the late 90s and those artworks are clearly inspired by the likes of Dungeons and Dragons from the 80s and 90s as well. Yes, we can all agree on that this was a different time in the terms of how fantasy was perceived and who actually created this fantasy art. It was nerdy guys who liked hot women, and I don't blame them, but the fact remains that they are the product of those ancient Guna brains of back in the day. The new designs are plain and simple. Gone are the days of skimpy outfits and petite women with massive bazongas, no excessive makeup and no cleaning on the ground with a perfect arched back, if you know what I'm saying. Some people say that they look too manly, have way too broad shoulders and their jawline resembles Giga Chad. To be perfectly honest, yes, those women in the remake might not be conventionally peak beautiful, but that does not mean that there aren't women in real life who look like this. By the way, I think that Syrah kinda reminds me of Carmela Soprano a bit. Are my eyes failing me or what? Dear God, am I becoming insane already? Yet, we can clearly see that Seraphia, for example, looks like a bodybuilder. She's got an undeniable wide-ass statue and looks a bit like that lass from The Last of Us Part 2. You know the one. The clothing is also not fitting for the role of a concubine. Velaya and Seraphia's clothes look like second-hand trash found near Onar's farm. Syrah, on the other hand, seems to be dressed a bit more appropriate, at least. I also think that a big visual problem of the remake is the fact that there are no real body types, something I've criticized plenty in previous videos. People were making fun of Gorn being a very slender dude while he was of muscular appearance in the original. If the original achieved to have different body types, why doesn't the remake do the same? Yes, I know this would devour resources, but it would also boost immersion, right? This lack of body types might be the reason for the women having broad shoulders and a ready-to-fight stance. But is that even the point that the so-called quote-unquote incel brigade is trying to make? They look like peasant women from the fields of Khorinis, and if they would be, I wouldn't even bat an eye. Is this a bad thing itself? No, it isn't, but like so often, context might play a role here. Alright, what do peasant women do? Just take a look at Barbara in Gothic 2. She is working the fields all day long. Physical exercise for 8 hours a day. On top of that, she works for Sakob, that old slave driver. I bet she has more muscles and a bigger frame than most women and men who live in the upper quarter of Khorinis. Obviously, this is not represented in her model itself, but it would make sense, right? It is also noteworthy that many of the female criminals are common people. Don't expect them to be Vogue-tier models with a tiny hip and the most beautiful body features. However, here comes the counter-argument. Gomez, the Supreme Ore Baron, basically the leader of the colony in the Valley of Mines, has great power over the king. He is the reason why the war is still going on in a way. The one who controls the ore controls the colony, and if we take a step further, this person can potentially change the course of war. Gomez can demand anything from the king, and he will get it with a kiss on the hand and a lovely ribbon on top. If Gomez wants exceptionally beautiful women to serve him, he will get them. And don't be fooled, the role of the women in Gothic 1 is pretty clear. They are not empowered. They're not upper class. They might live a better life than the common digger or scraper, but after all, they are one thing: sex slaves. Yes, it is a somewhat hard to swallow fact, but this is a harsh truth, and it is what makes Gothic so grounded and believable. In an all-male prison, the mightiest man still has access to women. So, how can we find together in this dilemma? I think there is a certain timeless eroticism that would be fitting for the concubines belonging to the leaders of the different camps, without sexualizing them in an over-the-top way. I tried to generate some pictures with AI, but to be honest, they don't really do justice what I had envisioned. I think the closest example might be Keira Metz from The Witcher 3. She's beautiful. Her clothes just reveal enough to get our mind going, but it is erotic and not a straight-up depiction of porn and fetishes. In the end, I think the best way is to find a middle ground where we have women who do not wear BDSM-style clothing, but instead some more modest dresses while still being above average looking compared to the likes of the peasant women of the realm. This would reflect reality in a way and make the situation more believable and grounded. In the end, I must say that I got quite tired of the past years from seeing over-sexualized stuff in video games. I play to immerse myself in a fantasy world, to escape the horrors of real life and to cool off a bit. But if I want to see other stuff, for example when I'm indeed, let's say, aroused, I don't play games, not at all, because there is a whole internet full of that stuff, and you know what? Most of it is for free. By the way, why are people still paying for OnlyFans when that stuff is all over the digital world for free? I don't get it. What I want to say, I guess, is that there is a space and time to enjoy these things, and they don't need to be ham-fisted into video games. Of course, there are certain games that aim to combine those things, but it is absolutely no must in my opinion. I have grown tired of witnessing degenerate Gooner brains injecting their perverse fantasies into video games like Half-Life 2's cinematic mod, for example, where it feels completely out of place at times and its intricate details serve no purpose and actually devaluate the seriousness of that universe. I get an aneurysm every time I open X and see a plethora of artists goonerizing games like World of Warcraft, infecting the fandom with weird furry feet or even worse fetishes. I am by no means a prude, but once again I want to say there is a place and a time to get funky, and I don't think this place is a regular video game. And don't get me wrong, I have nothing against erotic character designs, but those should be subtle and decent. If you don't know the difference between eroticism and porn, please look it up. We are living in times where women are allowed to look normal and flawed, but men need to be shredded with a chiseled jawline and a full head of hair. The double standards are rampant here. But even with all this said, video games should represent a fictional scenario in which people want to get lost. I don't need and want a perfect representation of myself, a fat, slobby and balding main character to identify myself with. We can identify with characters through many more aspects than just body types, skin or hair color, and other outer appearances. Through their hardships, their loss, their traits, we can feel connected on a deeper level. I want a game to be fun to look at, something that might even motivate me to work on myself. I don't want a perfect representation of the average population because I see that every day around me. Gothic is in somewhat of a weird spot because one of its core strengths is its believability. So I expect some folks to look just like regular people, but at the same time it is only logical that the concubines of the most powerful men are chosen to be rather exceptional looking. The problem with the whole discussion is that many people are seeing the remake's take on women as a single incident, an isolated incident. But others see quote-unquote the whole picture and how redesigns of characters in the past years tended to be more representative of the average real-world women. We have seen the likes of Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn, Kay Vess from Star Wars Outlaws, Mary Jane from Spider-Man and other characters, sometimes based on very appealing women, being turned into uncanny simulacrums. One may argue that this might be the fault of technical limitations or the inability to translate perfectly fine templates into the game's engine properly, but it is not an impossible task. Alex Vance from Half-Life looks absolutely stunning without being sexualized, and her model was made 20 years ago. Again, I want to reiterate, This is fiction. It is a place for the utmost beautiful people, the most disgusting monsters and abhorrent character traits, absolute love and deepest hatred. Extremes are what drive fantasy and fiction big time. Take a look at Emperor Palpatine, the most insidious and evil person in the Star Wars universe. His extreme antics formed the evil Galactic Empire. Look at the Last Unicorn's female protagonist basking in unending beauty. Witness Alan Ripley having the iron will and resolve to survive the massacre on the Nostromo. Tolkien's elves, a vision of humans if they would be almost perfect in regards to their beauty, knowledge, experience, and elegance. All these things are not realistic for most of the average population, but they are to be aspired to. Of course, fiction needs shades of grey, but these extremes emphasize not just parts of the story, but also lay the groundwork for a solid world building. I agree that this isn't the most important criticism regarding the remake, but it is kind of a representation of what the remake gets wrong about the original. Things make sense in the context of the colony, don't erase those unique design choices for no apparent reason. Ore lamps make sense because the Brotherhood doesn't care about physical riches. Beautiful women make sense because the ore barons wouldn't demand run-of-the-mill peasants from the fields or back alleys in Korinis. And the more or less simple design of Xardus' tower was weird enough to fit into the grounded low fantasy world of the colony, but now it looks like the Fortress of Doom straight out of Mordor. Well, this is my little take on this debate. Tell me what you guys think. Please be respectful, have a constructive discussion. Nevertheless, have a great day and see ya.